Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Senate Committee on Commerce and Labor for the 81st Legislative Session. Before we begin, please be sure to mute your microphone when you're not speaking to minimize the background noise. Madam Secretary, please call the roll.
Senator Hardy? Senator Lang?
Here.
Senator Neal?
Here.
Senator Pickard?
Here.
Senator Scheibel?
Here.
Senator Settlemeyer?
Here.
Chair Spearman?
Here. Thank you, ma'am, and it seems that all of us are here. So I'd like to welcome our audience joining us remotely and anyone listening over the internet. Today we will have a work session on Senate Bills 122, 141, 196, and we will hear 179. Just a few housekeeping items before we start. As you know, the legislative building is currently closed as a public safety measure to reduce the spread and infection rate of COVID-19 to the public. All committee meetings will be held virtually, meaning committee members, staff, and everyone else will participate either through Zoom, video conference, or by telephone. However, there are various ways members of the public can engage with us and participate throughout the process. These include registering to participate through Nellis, where you have the opportunity to testify on a bill or provide public comment during the meeting, submitting written comment to the committee email address or fax number listed on the agenda. You may also share your opinion via the legislature's opinion application on Nellis, or you may participate by watching us on Nellis or on the legislature's YouTube channel. To register on Nellis, simply click the Participate button near the committee meeting date and time. Then fill in the required information such as your name, the agenda item you're interested in, and your position on the bill. Once your registration is submitted, you will see a confirmation screen, and you will also receive an email with the phone number and meeting ID to call at the time of the meeting. Just to note that while meeting registration is required to participate, it does not guarantee you will be able to speak. Similar to previous sessions, comment and public comment may be limited due to time constraints. I will announce the time frame, how many minutes that is for each response, for, against, and neutral. It will be helpful if more than one person in your organization wishes to comment to remember that ditto is a good response when someone has already covered your points. This will allow more people to comment during that time frame. When you're on the phone line, please pay attention to which bill is being considered and follow the verbal prompts. BPS staff will notify you which keys to press and when to raise your hand, and when you may unmute yourself. The staff will call on you to speak by the last 3 digits of your phone number. Detailed instructions for participating in committee meetings are also available on the Help, which is linked in the banner at the top of every page on Nellis. If you need assistance with any of these processes, or if you would like to receive electronic notification of the committee's agendas and meetings, please contact our committee staff at the email listed on the agenda. Any exhibits for the committee must be submitted in electronic form no later than 8:00 a.m. the day before the meeting. To our committee staff, contact information may be found on the committee page in Nellis. In addition, any person an amendment to a bill being heard by the committee must first talk to the sponsor and let them know you intend to submit an amendment. I will not entertain any amendments if the bill sponsor is not aware of the amendment. The proposed amendment must be submitted in writing 24 hours prior to the meeting. Please include the bill number, a statement of intent, and your contact information. When testifying, please remember to unmute your microphone and clearly state your name and the entity you represent at the beginning of your testimony. Speak clearly and project your voice to ensure those watching remotely can hear your testimony. Please remember to turn the microphone off when you finish speaking. A reminder to all those who testify pursuant to Nevada Revised Statutes NRS 218E.085, it is unlawful for a person to knowingly misrepresent facts when testifying before a legislative committee. A person who knowingly does so is guilty of a misdemeanor. The chair and members of the committee may request any testifier to submit documentation supporting their testimony. To committee members, during these virtual meetings, when an agenda item is called for a vote, our committee will be using roll call to do so. When the committee secretary calls your name, please answer with a yes or no so that there is no confusion. Also, if you have a question, please raise your hand through the Zoom application. And finally, all exhibits received prior to the meeting will be available on Nellis online. And so today, let us begin our work session, and we will begin on Senate Bill 122. Mr. Malrejo, please begin.
Thank you, Senator Spearman. For the record, Cesar Malrejo, Committee Policy Analyst. First bill is Senate Bill 122, sponsored by Senator Brooks, and it was heard on March 3rd, 2021. Senate Bill 22 requires an employee and supervisory employee at a cannabis establishment not later than 1 year after an individual is hired to obtain a card stating that he or she has completed an approved general industry safety and health hazard recognition and prevention course, and to present the completion card to their employer. There are several amendments that are attached to this work session document. The first amendment is to amend Section 3 to clarify the definition of employee and to provide certain occupations that are not included in the term. Second amendment is to delete Section 8 of the bill, authorizing DIR to adopt regulations to carry out the provisions of this bill. And the third amendment is to delete subsection 1 of Section 9, requiring DIR to adopt regulations to approve safety and health hazard recognition and prevention training for workers and supervisors at cannabis establishments. Next amendment is to delete Section 15, requiring the Cannabis Compliance Board to suspend the license of a cannabis establishment who fails to suspend or terminate an employee who fails to obtain a card stating that he or she completed the general industry safety and health hazard recognition and prevention training. In place of Section 15, there will be a new section of the bill authorizing DIR to assess administrative fines against a cannabis establishment who fails to suspend or terminate an employee who fails to obtain a card stating that he or she has completed the general industry safety and health hazard recognition and prevention training. And these provisions are similar to other professions that are required to complete the same OSHA training. And those are all the amendments at this time. And we do have Senator Brooks on the call in case there's any questions.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Malrejo. Members of the committee, are there any questions? I don't see any hands.
Madam Chair, may I make a motion?
Yes, you may.
Madam Chair, I make a motion to amend and do pass Senate Bill 122.
Thank you. We have a motion by, was that Senator Scheibel or Senator Lang?
Senator Lang.
Senator Lang. We have a motion by Senator Lang. Do I have a second?
I will second it. This is Senator Scheibel.
Okay, second, Senator Scheibel. Any further discussion on the bill?
Madam Chair,
Yes?
Senator Settlemyre.
Yes, sir.
I'll take a look at the amendments and see if I can try to get to a more comfortable spot with it. At this point in time, in talking with the industry, it seems a little bit onerous, and therefore at this point in time, I'll be voting no. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Anything that Senator Brooks may clarify for you?
I've been talking to this industry, and at this particular time, Chair, the question is of need. So far, I have not been demonstrated the reasoning for individuals that are doing nothing more than retail to acquire a license dealing with issues that have nothing to do with their job. At this particular time, I'm not comfortable. So no, I do not believe there's anything necessarily. Senator Brooks has done an excellent job with his presentation as far as presenting the bill. However, I have not seen an absolute need for this particular situation. So at this point in time, I am a no.
Thank you, sir. Any other questions, discussions?
Yes, Madam Chair.
Yes?
I too have been talking to a number of, including the vertically integrated operations, and what they've told me is that their existing training is far more extensive than the OSHA 10, and that although I do like the fact that we've ameliorated somewhat the kind of heavy-handed, or what they described as a heavy-handed approach to compliance enforcement. And given this is still an emerging market, I think I'm going to vote yes to get it out of committee with the reservation to change my vote on the floor.
Thank you. Senator Brooks, just for the sake of those who are watching and may not be here when, may not be watching when we take a vote on the Senate floor, would you like to respond to any of these concerns?
Thank you, Chair Spearman. Appreciate the opportunity to respond and appreciate the questions from the senators on the committee. We worked very closely with the industry and the industry organization representatives to get to a place where we feel that it reflects the business models that currently exist in the cannabis industry. And I really appreciate the input from the Nevada Dispensary Association and as well as from the UFCW, and coming to a place where we are in agreement with the industry on what this bill looks like. So I don't necessarily have any direct answers to the questions that Senator Settlemyre or Senator Pickard brought up. I think we've gone quite a bit of a way to get to a place that we are in agreement with the industry.
So are you able to bring a cord to the computer?
Senator Hardy, can you say what you said just before this? And please get a little closer to the mic. Senator Hardy, did you make a comment?
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Oh, that's so much better.
I am going to vote for this with reserving my right, looking for those inputs that Senator Settlemyre was about. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So I imagine we are ready now for the vote. Madam Secretary, please do a roll call.
Senator Hardy.
Yes.
Senator Lang.
Yes.
Senator Neal.
Yes.
Senator Pickard.
Yes.
Senator Scheibel.
Yes.
Senator Settlemyre.
No.
Chair Spearman.
Yes? Thank you, and let the record show that the motion passes 6-1, 6 affirmative and 1 no. And so now we will, let's see here, Senator Brooks, you want to take this statement on the floor?
Thank you, Chair Spearman.
Okay, thank you, thank you. So now let's move to our work session on Senate Bill 141. And let's begin this, Mr. Margarejo. Please begin when you are ready.
Thank you, Chair Spearman. For the record, Cesar Margarejo, Committee Policy Analyst. Our next bill is Senate Bill 141. It was sponsored by Senator Brooks and was heard on March 10th, 2021. Senate Bill 141 removes the prospective June 30th, 2021 expiration of the authority for public bodies to enter into contracts with construction managers at risk, therefore making the authorization permanent. As was presented during the bill presentation, this bill repeals several provisions from Assembly Bill 283 from the 2013 Statutes of Nevada that sunset the provisions related to CMAR. Senator Brooks did propose a couple of amendments that are attached to this work session document. The first amendment is to amend the bill to clarify the types of projects that are considered as horizontal construction. And the second amendment is to clarify the types of projects that are considered vertical construction. And those were all the amendments.
Thank you. And I see Senator Settlemeyer's hand. Yes, sir.
If you're ready for motion, Madam Chair, amend do pass.
Okay. Let me make sure there's no discussions. Okay. Motion made by Senator Settlemeyer. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a second by Senator Pickard. Any further discussion? Seeing none, Madam Secretary, please do a roll call.
Senator Hardy,
Yes.
Senator Lang,
Yes.
Senator Neal,
Yes.
Senator Pickard,
Yes.
Senator Scheibel,
Yes.
Senator Settlemyer,
Yes.
Chair Spearman.
Yes. Thank you, ma'am, and let the record show that the motion passes unanimously. Again, Senator Brooks, would you take this on the floor statement?
Thank you, Chair Spearman.
Okay, thank you. I'm not sure that anyone else could probably explain it as well as you do.
I will give it my best shot.
Okay, thank you so much. We'll begin work session now on Senate Bill 196. So let's begin this work session. Mr. Magarejo, please walk us through the bill.
Thank you, Chair. For the record, Cesar Melgarejo, Committee Policy Analyst. Our next bill is Senate Bill 196 and sponsored by Senators Lang, Hardy, Hammond, Scheibel, and Pickard. And it was heard on March 12, 2021. And this bill prohibits healthcare providers from performing or supervising pelvic examinations on an anesthetized or unconscious patient without first obtaining the patient's informed consent, except under certain circumstances. The bill also prohibits healthcare providers or a person supervised by a healthcare provider from performing or supervising pelvic examinations they are not appropriately licensed, certified, or registered to perform, or that are not within their scope of practice. Finally, the bill authorizes an imposition of professional discipline or denial of a license or certification for providers of healthcare who perform it or supervise a pelvic examination when prohibited within their scope of practice. And there were no amendments to this measure.
Thank you, sir. I'll accept a motion.
Motion to do pass from Senator
Okay, is
Scheibel.
it Senator Scheibel? Okay, do I have a second?
Second.
Second.
Senator Hardy, second. Any further discussion? Any questions? Thank you. Madam Secretary, please call the roll.
Senator Hardy, Senator Lang,
Yes.
Senator Neal,
Yes.
Senator Pickard,
Yes.
Senator Scheibel,
Yes.
Senator Settlemyer,
Yes.
Can I go back to Senator Hardy?
Yes.
Chair Spearman.
Yes? Thank you, and let the record show that the motion passes unanimously. Senator Lang, would you take the floor statement?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. So now, let us open the hearing on Senate Bill 179. Joint presenters, Ina Neal, Administrator of Aging and Disability Services Division, Zitreek Robb, Deputy Administrator, and Adrienne Navarro, and Jennifer Montoya. So please begin when you are ready.
Good morning, Madam Chair Spearman and members of the Senate Committee on Commerce and Labor. We'd like to thank you for the opportunity to introduce Senate Bill 179 on behalf of the Legislative Committee on Seniors, Veterans, and Adults with Special Needs. My name is Ricky Robb. I'm the Deputy Administrator for Aging and Disability Services Division, and I will be co-presenting with Jennifer Montoya this morning. As Ms. Montoya is a deaf individual herself, I would like to take an opportunity to ensure that she and the sign language interpreter is penned this morning. So if I can just take a moment and make sure that anyone who needs to utilize an ASL interpreter today, that they are able to see that individual prior to starting the presentation. Okay, I'm not seeing anything come up, so I'm going to begin to the presentation on Senate Bill 179, revises the provisions relating to sign language interpreting and real-time captioning. To open, the intent of this bill is to increase the quality of sign language interpreting services statewide, to provide a pathway for interpreters to achieve required credentialing standards, to remove classification specific language to align with other NRS language and establish specific classifications and requirements by regulation. We would also like to provide standard qualifications for mentors. Established in 2001, Nevada Revised Statute 656A requires sign language interpreters to hold certain professional credentials to practice in the state. The original bill provided credential requirements that were in alignment with the national standards for both K-12, educational interpreters, and community interpreters. In 2007, the revisions to the NRS 656A lowered those credentialing requirements for K-12 educational interpreters and the community interpreters due to a lack of qualified interpreters to meet the demand. We now have structures in place in the state to support interpreters and the interpreting development. I will now turn over the presentation to Jennifer Montoya, who will go through the sections of the bill and explain the changes throughout this bill. As I mentioned earlier, Ms. Montoya is a deaf individual herself, so I'd like to emphasize the importance for anyone speaking to please state your name to ensure that she knows who is speaking and prior to speaking. My apologies. Also, when Ms. Montoya is speaking, please engage by viewing her, not the interpreter. Although her voicing is through an interpreter, Ms. Montoya is the one speaking to the committee. So we just want to provide a little bit of that education when we're working with a deaf individual, that when you're face-to-face with a deaf individual and the interpreter is speaking on their behalf, you want to make sure that you're engaging the individual who is deaf. So again, I'd like to turn this over to Ms. Montoya, and we look forward to any questions that you may have.
Ms. Robb, just a minute. I don't know that the audience can see the interpreter.
Okay.
I know we usually highlight the speaker, but maybe we want to put it on gallery view for this to make sure that they can see the interpreter.
Yes, the request was to, sorry, Ricky Robb, for the record, the request was to be able to see the individual, Ms. Montoya, as well as the interpreter.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Robb. For the record, my name is Jennifer Montoya, and I'm a Social Services Program Specialist for the Nevada Aging and Disability Services Division, also known as ADSD. To provide context before we go through the sections of the bill, I would like to explain the interpreting process and the impact of the qualifications of interpreters. Interpreting is a multifaceted process requiring the cognitive management of linguistic, interpersonal, and environmental factors. The goal of interpreting is to convey the meaning of an individual's message equally in the other language so people can communicate their ideas to one another. The quality of an interpretation varies greatly depending on the interpreter's knowledge, skills, and experience. These minimum credentialing requirements impact deaf children's access to education and deaf adults' access to employment, healthcare, government services, and in every area of life where communication takes place. NRS 656A has not been updated for 14 years, and it is crucial that the state credentialing requirements for this profession align with national standards. There are deaf and hard of hearing children in this state who are not receiving access to education because they are placed in a mainstream classroom where their interpreters are unqualified or underqualified. This means the interpreters do not have the interpreting skills and knowledge to work in the educational setting in a way that fosters the child's development. Sadly, this situation means that many of these children learn sign communication skills through interpreters due to the lack of peers or role models who are also deaf or hard of hearing, or even family members who sign at home. This puts the children in jeopardy, which affects their ability to graduate with a standard diploma, navigate relationships with people in their lives, and become independent. In order to help these children receive the educational opportunities they deserve, we want to increase the state credentialing requirements so that deaf or hard of hearing students are provided with effective and appropriate accommodations. I will now be happy to walk the committee through each section of the bill and briefly explain what the changes are. I will begin with Section 1, which adds new language to define the post-secondary education setting, while Section 2 makes a conforming change to include the new definition added by Section 1. In Section 7, the exemption for persons who engage in the practice of sign language interpreting or the practice of real-time captioning solely for the meetings of nonprofit civic organizations was removed. In Section 9 contains the largest substantial changes, which raises the minimum credentialing requirements for K through 12 educational interpreters and community interpreters to bring Nevada back in alignment with the national standards that we had back in 2001. Additionally, Section 9 establishes provisional registration for underqualified interpreters to be given a time to improve their knowledge and skill to meet those national standards. The stricken language in Section 9 is conforming changes to remove classification-specific language. Section 10 authorizes the division to set qualifications for professional mentors and establish additional professional classifications. Section 18 of this bill grandfathers existing registrants who do not meet the proposed credentialing requirements for a limited time. And this will only impact 20 interpreters. And lastly, sections 3, 4, 6, 10 through 12, 14 through 17, and section 20 of this bill proposes minor cleanup language to align with industry standard language and registration requirements. We appreciate the time you've taken to hear our proposed bill.
This is Ricky Robb. For the record, we'd be happy to take any questions that the committee may have.
Thank you, Ms. Robb. Committee, are there any questions? I see Senator Scheibel and Senator Pickard. Senator Scheibel, please go first.
Thank you, and thank you so much for your presentation. I don't have questions about the bill as it's written. I think this is much needed in Nevada. My question is whether there is a plan in place to accompany the bill to attract more sign language interpreters to Nevada. I don't know about Northern Nevada, but I know in Southern Nevada, we definitely have a shortage.
Thank you for your questions. This is Jennifer Montoya for the record. And in this bill, we are looking at working with institutions for their hiring practices for interpreters.
And this is Ricky Robb. For the record, I can add to that. What we will be doing, and which is something that we've been continuing to do, is to really, once we build up that system for the mentor piece of it, we are always, when we're recruiting, we are always looking at national recruitment. So this is not just for Nevada. We would make sure that if there are others that would like to come to Nevada to be an interpreter, we are encouraging that as well. We've actually had some of our interpreters that work for now ADSD, which was passed in 2017. So we thank you for the committee who these interpreters are now the mentors. And so we've already been able to build on that the last couple of years. So with this will just encourage other individuals to be able to come to our state or to actually work within that field. So Senator Scheibel, we appreciate that question. And that is something that we will be working on to encourage individuals to, one, become an interpreter, and then also to ensure that they've been mentored and they have proper credentialing to provide quality services for deaf and hard of hearing individuals in our state.
Chair Spearman, this inspired a
This is
follow-up
Jennifer
question
Montoya for the
you.
record. If I could add to what Ricky just said, is that yes, ADSD has been providing mentoring services. We have been providing workshops to interpreters, consulting with school districts, and that's part of what the task is of the state interpreter mentors. And that has actually changed their job description to include all of that within the department. And so that's one example of what we are doing at the state, is we are consulting with more agencies and school districts to talk about the quality of interpreters.
If I could have a follow-up, Chair Spearman.
Yes, please attend.
Thank you. So that inspired another question. I'm just thinking, I wonder if actually this might help to attract interpreters, especially on the national scale. If I'm getting certified as an interpreter in Oregon and thinking about where to move next in my career, it seems like I would want to go to a state that has really high quality interpreters and meets the highest standards of education for those interpreters. And now Nevada would be among those states.
Ricky Robb for the record. And yes, that is exactly what we would like. We would like to have quality interpreters want to be in the state of Nevada to support our deaf and hard of hearing. So great piece of that. That is part of what we're working on, improving the overall system. We have ranked very low interpreting services in the past. So with the mentoring program and the supports that we have been able to create for the deaf and hard of hearing, the Deaf Commission has been a significant addition to that as well. So thank you for that, Senator, because we really do believe that what we are doing and the changes that we are requesting to make within Senate Bill 179 will do exactly that. It will hopefully bring more individuals into our state, also open up the opportunities for those that are here so that we can grow our own as well. So it is definitely an opportunity, and we do believe that Senate Bill 179 can support that.
This is Jennifer Montoya for the record. And part of our consulting services is also we work, like I said, with the school districts, and we talk to them about recruiting. And we've consulted on where you can do national recruiting to be able to advertise your positions to recruit from out of the state and bring in those top quality interpreters. Our CAS mentorship program was established about 2 years ago. And we've had the first year was a pilot, and the second year we've had a total of 20 mentees participating each year in our program. And actually in total, we've had more than 20 mentees in our program. Several of those mentees have now gone and taken their test, and their credentials have improved drastically. We've seen their scores improve quite a bit and have now reached those national standards. Due to COVID, unfortunately, national testing has been on hold for the last year. So we haven't been able to see all the fruits of our labor of the mentorship program, but we are starting now. They're starting to go back and sign up again because the test is now being provided. So we are very confident that we're going to see those test scores also improve from the people who have been participants in the mentorship program. We saw it in the past before COVID, and we expect to see it now. Our mentorship program is evidence-based. It looks at ethics, it looks at skill development, it looks at and mostly teaches self-analysis so that the interpreters can work on their own and be able to improve on their own even after they leave the mentorship program. And we have these interpreters and mentors in place to be able to set and talk about the minimum qualifications. And that's one of the reasons we have proposed this bill.
Madam Chair, if I may, can I add one more thing, please? This is Ricky Robb. College of Southern Nevada has the first Nevada four-year program in interpreting too. So we're hoping that all of these changes are what's going to bring Nevada to the forefront in interpreting services as well. So thank you for that.
Thank you. Senator Pickard.
And thank you, Madam Chair. I'm excited by the thought of anything, frankly, that gives our students a better ability to understand what they're trying to learn. I always think that's a good move on our part. I guess following up on Senator Scheibel's thought that this would encourage people to come, that's interesting to me, because when I first read this, I thought as we raise the qualification requirements, we tend to exclude rather than include people. We make it harder to qualify. I thought that this would act as a disincentive, but I'm glad to hear that the opposite is true. So my question becomes one of what happens in the transition period when this takes effect? It sounds like, if I understand correctly, there are a good number of interpreters that frankly aren't qualified, particularly as we look at the definition under Section 1 and Section 4, where we're identifying education and post-secondary education, where now the interpreters have to be, as I understand this, well-versed in the subject matter. So now we're going to have to find people that understand the subject matter that can properly interpret. With that then in mind, what happens to the people who are doing the work now and trying to struggle through that but don't necessarily qualify? Are they going to be allowed to continue in their practice, or will they be cut off and we have to find someone new?
Thank you for your question, Senator Pickard. This is Jennifer Montoya for the record. And as I said, we have a mentorship program which is raising the standards of many interpreters. And I do want to clarify that we have around 334 interpreters registered in the state. And there are 227 of them that are community interpreters and 112 that are educational. There are only 46 that do not meet that 4.0 standard. Of those 46, there are only 20 that are actually not qualified in the provisional of the 3.5 standard. So there are only 20 of them that don't meet the standard currently, but we would give them that 3-year grandfathering grace period to be able to meet those standards. And again, they can participate in our mentorship program. And to emphasize, it's really only 20 of them right now that don't meet that standard out of the total number that we have throughout our state. Again, as Ricky mentioned, we have so many more resources in our states. We have mentoring programs, we have interpreter programs, and things like that that they can participate in to be able to improve their skills.
All right. Go ahead.
This is Adrienne Navarro for the record. I'm the Chief of Advocacy and Community Services with the Aging and Disability Services Division, and I oversee our Communication Access Services program. So I just wanted to add to what Jennifer said, in that I think your question, Senator Pickard, you were asking also, or saying that the interpreters would need to be knowledgeable in the subject they were interpreting, whether it be primary, secondary, or post-secondary education. And that's not the case. That's not what this is changing. An interpreter needs to be knowledgeable in interpreting. And that's what we're now trying to require and have those standards increased. So they are transferring that information from a primary, a secondary, or a post-secondary instructor, educator, to the deaf individual. So the interpreting practice is what we're looking at here, and increasing that level of interpreting skill so that the knowledge from the information from the educator to the student is accurate. Because when the score is lower, the score that Jennifer has referred to is lower, a 3.0, we have found, or studies have been shown, that only about 60% of the information is accurate that then gets to the student. So they're not getting the information they need to learn the subject. So I just wanted to clarify that we're not, through this bill, now requiring that interpreters have the knowledge of the subject that's being taught. We're requiring that they have the interpreting skill to do that work.
All right, thank you for that. I think that's a very important clarification because as I read this, particularly when I read it after having read it and looking at the totality, it seemed to me that we were going to a point where we want the interpreter to understand enough to be able to interpret and convey the information as opposed to merely worrying about the practice. Because I realize there's a difference there. And I think that's an important clarification. So my follow-up to that would only be that I'm curious to know how many interpreters do we think we would need to add to the 300 some that we have now in order to be adequately supplied? How many people are we trying to recruit here?
So this is Adrienne Navarro for the record, and I don't know if we have a specific number in terms of how many we're trying to recruit, because it's not the state itself, not Aging and Disability Services, that is trying to recruit interpreters. We actually employ 4 interpreters specifically that were funded in a previous session that are providing these mentoring services for state or interpreters within Nevada, either our educational or our community interpreters. Those individuals are employed generally by a agency who then people can contract with or hire to utilize an interpreter. So I'm not sure that we have an exact number or really even a range of how many interpreters we need in Nevada. We definitely know that we need more. So we're trying to work very hard to do that. And I think, as Senator Scheibel said, by increasing these standards, we are going to be able to attract more interpreters to Nevada because we are not at that lowest level of a state.
All right, thank you for that. I mean, I'm sensitive to this. My wife signs, she can hear just fine, but she had a friend, lifelong friend who's deaf. And so she signs, now she's a district court judge and she can help there too. But this is something near and dear to us. And I applaud your efforts. And thank you, Madam Chair, for allowing me to ask these questions.
Thank you. Additional questions, committee? I don't see any hands, so I just have a couple, and I'm not exactly sure, Ricky, whether this would go to you or to Ms. Montoya or to Ms. Navarro. So I'll just ask it, and whoever can answer it, please do so. Last session, I had a bill that would require all insurance companies to cover hearing aids for children because I was told by several parents that they're not ready for school because what they learn in terms of language, when their peers are 5, they may be a couple of years behind just because the parents are kind of left there to try to figure it out until they find that there's other options available. So here's a question. Is there any possibility that we might aggressively go for grants, some other type of funding, so that we can get hearing aids, more hearing aids for children who cannot, their parents cannot afford it? That's the first question.
So this is Adrienne Navarro for the record. Thank you for that question, Chair Spearman. We're very familiar with the bill from last session and the hearing aids for the children. And we did actively look for grants for hearing aids after that bill was passed. We were not able to find any grants, any other funding for that. What we did discover, though, in implementing the program was that individuals of low income that qualify with the health insurance exchange, which is available for them. Actually, the health insurance exchange includes hearing aids as an essential health benefit within the any exchange covered insurance program. So that was something that we discovered, asked for all families to apply for insurance through the health exchange, and then they would have access to hearing aid through those health insurance covered programs.
Thank you. And I ask that because it seems to me that if we can, the quicker we can get students ready for school, to attend school, the hearing aids would help get them to a place that until we get the proper amount of interpreters, at least the students have a chance. Next thing I would ask, and I'm trying to remember whether it was here. I do know that one of my nephews in Texas took sign language and they classified that as a foreign language. And he took it from his 9th grade through his senior year. And so by the time he graduated, he was quite proficient. I don't know if that's a possibility. I don't know if it's something we've considered. But if we would do something like that, I think it would serve two purposes. Number one, those who take that and become adept in that skill would be ready after high school to maybe go right into a mentoring program. The other advantage I think that we would have is that they would be, if they were in a class with a student who was deaf or hard of hearing, they could probably also assist them in some ways. And I'm not saying take the place of interpreters or mentors. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying I'm trying to think of ways that until we get to where we need to be, that we have we provide all of the opportunities for our students to be successful, and that what looks like a barrier now to success actually is a challenge that we can overcome.
And this is Adrienne Navarro for the record, and I can speak to that on a personal note here in Nevada. I actually have a 16-year-old son who is taking ASL. He's in his 2nd year of ASL at Carson High School, and they do consider that a foreign language. So it is foreign language credit for him. Now, every high school in Nevada does not offer ASL. I don't know. I think there may only be 2. I'm not positive on that, but it's not every high school that does offer that. I'll have Jennifer speak to this, sorry, a little bit more as well. But in terms of taking ASL and interpreting, those are 2 very different things. So somebody can come out of having years 1 and 2 of American Sign Language, but it doesn't necessarily mean that they're skilled in then interpreting that language, English to ASL and ASL to English. So there's specific interpreting skills that need to be learned, and that can be done through College of Southern Nevada. They now have an interpreting program. So their program isn't just teaching ASL, but it's about interpreting. So I want to make that clear that I think that's a misnomer sometimes, is that when somebody learns ASL, they know the basics of ASL, they can then interpret. Interpreting is much more than that. There's linguistic components to it. And this is where I'll turn it over to Jennifer, because she can speak to that much more, but there's a much larger piece to interpreting than knowing the language itself.
Yes, this is Jennifer Montoya for the record. Learning ASL and learning interpreting skills are a different skill set. And that's part of the challenge that we have here within our state. Many people in our state take ASL classes and think that they are ready to be qualified as an interpreter. They have yet to take any interpreter classes through a formal interpreter training program. So they're missing those interpreting skills. And unfortunately, those folks who take ASL classes are being placed in classroom with deaf and hard of hearing students and are being expected to function as an interpreter, which is why we see those skills being underqualified and unqualified in the classroom. And you need those full interpreting skills to be able to understand how to navigate the two languages. And that's what we need in the quality in the interpreters in the K through 12 environment. CSN did set up their 4-year program a few years ago, and we applaud them for that. And we look forward to seeing more interpreters come and graduate from that program and who would be ready and have the skill set to begin interpreting once they graduate. Before CSN had their program, unfortunately, we had many interpreters who would have to go out of state to receive that type of training in interpreter training programs out of state. And oftentimes they didn't even come back. And so that left us stranded without interpreters. And so many of them didn't move back here to work. They would stay or go somewhere else, as was mentioned earlier, being recruited out of state. So keeping the interpreters here in the state, we have a better chance to do that with CSN. And so I'm hoping that with their program and growing our own interpreters here would be great. It would be great to have an interpreter training program here in the North for those interpreters that service the area north of Las Vegas. Anything else you wanted to add, Ms. Robb?
Yes, thank you. Ricky Robb for the record. The one thing that I want us to keep in mind too, the ASL courses, I have a son who actually used ASL as his foreign language in college. And so one of the things that was really good is that it gave the ability to communicate with a deaf and hard of hearing individual. So we want to encourage that. We want them to have that ability and to be successful in that, because it also opens up that opportunity for the deaf and hard of hearing to communicate with more individuals in our state as well. So I think it's a really good starting off place where they could, if they're interested in interpreting, because then they can learn the communication piece of it and then build on their skills once they are able to go into that interpreting coursework as well. So it is really kind of building on those skills too. So just keeping that in mind, it is a great opportunity. Unfortunately, we don't have a lot of high schools that provide that. If that's something that we could increase, we would love to work with the Department of Education and the special education departments throughout the state to encourage that as well in giving that an opportunity. Because again, that would allow them to communicate with their deaf peers. And as we know in our education system, that's part of what we're lacking as well, is giving them the opportunity to be able to communicate with the individuals that they're growing up with and with the individuals that they go to school with. And so we would really, really encourage that as we move forward too. So as we all know, we can't take on everything at once. And each year we have had, for the last 5 years that I've been involved, we've had the opportunity to build on that with our commission, with the mentors that we now have that are within Aging and Disability Services. We have really seen us grow as a state. And so that is really what we're looking for on SB 179, is to grow the individuals who are interacting with the deaf and hard of hearing, as well as growing those individuals who can actually provide that interpreting service to an individual who is deaf and hard of hearing, which also bridges the gap for all communication to our children in the community, as well as in our court systems, in our healthcare system. So we really do believe that by raising the bar and increasing the credentialing and the quality of services, that we will be able to do what's right for the individuals who live in our state.
Thank you for that. And just 2 more questions, and I don't think they will be long. And thank you for the clarification. I think what I was asking that first question, is there any way we can take those who are in sign language classes now, and once they finish, give them the opportunity to move into a mentor program. So the next question would be, I do know that there are, in some places, the military has people who are interpreters. Is there any opportunity to maybe partner with the military or find out if there are any in the area that might be able to help us lessen the burden? That's number one. And You can answer if you know it, and it's okay if you don't. I'm told by our policy analyst, Mr. Melrejo, that there are interpreters at concerts. And I remember there have been some in entertainment venues. We don't know who hires them. Maybe it's the venue. But if we could figure out how they get those interpreters and if they are local, and even if they are not, perhaps there's a way for us to talk to them and coax them into coming to Nevada. Just a thought, just a thought.
Ricky Robb for the record. So on the military, it's not something that we are currently aware of, but we will certainly look into that. That will definitely be on our list for sure. When it comes to the concerts, I can tell you what typically happens when an individual needs an interpreter. They make a request. So we would need to look into some of those concerts that we don't know if someone made a request, which is typically what would happen. They would need to make the request to have that interpreter. There could be some concert venues that automatically have them because they're used to that population being involved. But normally they would need to make the request, and then they would do something similar that we do, and that would be contract through an interpreting service. It is the same thing with what we call CART, the real-time inscriptioning, that like the reader boards underneath, things like that, it would be the same thing. So it would be a contract that someone would ask. It could be local. I have been to some things in the northern area that some of our local interpreters have interpreted for concerts as well as speaking engagements. But my understanding, based on the individuals that were there for those venues that I have seen, they were requested by a deaf individual to actually have that contracted through the venue. I don't know if Ms. Montoya or Ms. Navarro have anything to add to that.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Robb. And the last thing I'll say is if you contact the VA, I know that hearing loss is one of those things that's prevalent for people who have been in the military in certain MOSs, military occupation specialties. So the VA may have a lead on that as well. So just a thought. Committee, are there any additional questions or comments? So thank you, Ms. Robb, Ms. Navarro, and Ms. Montoya. Thank you for the presentation. And we will now close the hearing on Senate Bill 179. And I'll open the hearing on Senate Bill, I'm sorry. I didn't do that. I always do that. Going to see if there are anybody that's listening that might want to support and broadcast. If you open those lines, and for those who want to support Senate Bill 179. I'm going to make myself a note because I do that all the time.
Thank you, Chair. To testify in support of SB 179, please press *9 now to take your place in the queue.
And there'll be 3 minutes per, and we'll do 30 minutes, okay?
Thank you. Caller with the last 3 digits of 388, please slowly spell and state your name for the record. You have 3 minutes and may begin.
Eric Wilcox, ERICWILCOX. Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity to speak, and thank you for the discussion of this critical issue. I'm a parent of a deaf child here in Nevada, and I am also the vice chair of the Nevada Commission for Persons who are Deaf and Hard of Hearing. First of all, on behalf of the Commission, we encourage this committee to support Senate Bill 179. The State Strategic Plan for the Deaf and Hard of Hearing, which is referenced in the written comments that I submitted, notes that there's a critical need for a high quality and adequately numbered workforce to serve this community. You should know that the Commission routinely hears from members of the community who lack adequate access to critical services, including healthcare and education, because of the insufficient number and quality of American Sign Language interpreters, which was also noted in the discussion by Senator Scheibel earlier in this hearing. The Commission feels that the provisions in this bill will translate to better and more effective communication for deaf individuals, which is critical for their daily living needs and thereby helps us meet a really crucial goal of the state strategic plan for the deaf and hard of hearing. The Commission also applauds the efforts of the Aging and Disability Services Division to provide training and mentoring for American Sign Language interpreters throughout the state. And likewise, we applaud the efforts of the institutions of higher education in the state to grow programs in deaf studies. As was discussed today by this committee, support for these vital programs provides the structure that makes it possible for Nevada to enforce higher standards for American Sign Language interpreting services in the state. And if I may, let me add a personal note to mention that my daughter, who's in the 3rd grade in the Washoe County School District, relies daily on both American Sign Language interpreters and real-time captioning to access the educational content in her classroom, as well as conversations and discussions among her peers. The access to competent and well-trained interpreters and transcriptionists is the difference between a case where she has adequate access to all of the content and conversations in her classroom and a case where she misses vital elements of the instructional content that's available to her typically hearing peers, as was noted earlier in the comments by Ms. Navarro. So on a personal level, I also urge you to support efforts such as this bill to improve the access to services for the deaf and hard of hearing in the state of Nevada. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. We are currently taking support of SB 179. To testify in support, please press *9 now to take your place in the queue. Chair, you have no more callers in support at this time.
Thank you. So we'll go to opposition. Same time frame, 3 per.
To testify in opposition of SB 179, please press *9 now to take your place in the queue. Chair, you have no callers in opposition at this time.
Thank you. We'll go to those in testifying in neutral.
To testify neutral on SB 179, please press *9 now to take your place in the queue. Chair, you have no callers that are neutral at this time.
Thank you so much. Ms. Montoya or Ms. Navarro, any closing comments?
Madam Chair. This is Senator Settlemeyer. Chair, I just had a question. Maybe would it be a thought that I've thought of other professions out there, and sometimes when we've gone to certification, we've still allowed individuals that are currently in the queue that are on file as having the qualifications. They've demonstrated their intermediate interpreting skills. Will they still be allowed to continue on with this bill, or will they have to now get certification? In other words, I'd hate to lose some people that currently are providing this skill adequately and lose them by the requirement of them having a certification, kind of a grandfathering provision that many professions sometimes do when we bring forth licensing criteria, which this isn't a license, so I may take that back. But making sure that individuals that are currently capable of doing it and are being allowed to do it, will they still be able to continue after this, or do we need to think about a clause to help out with that?
This is Jennifer Montoya for the record. And there is a clause in Section 18 that has a provision for grandfathering those individuals for a limited time that don't currently meet the credentialing requirements. It's a 3-year clause that allows them to continue working and improving their skills to be able to meet those minimum qualifications.
Thank you. I'm sorry I missed that. Thank you very much.
Additional questions, committee? Ms. Robb, Ms. Montoya, or Ms. Navarro, any closing comments?
Ricky Robb for the record. We just want to thank you for the opportunity to present today, and we request your support. And we really do believe that this is just another step in increasing quality interpreters for the deaf and hard of hearing in the state of Nevada, as well as ensuring that the opportunities for individuals who want to be interpreters, and to raise that bar, and not raise the bar, but ensure that what we do have in our state, that individuals are receiving good quality interpreting services, and that they are able to have equal opportunities to be able to have a good understanding of what is happening in their world by having a quality interpreter. So we just thank you for your time today. We look forward to hear your support as we move forward. So again, thank you, and have a great afternoon.
Thank you, ma'am. And thank you, Ms. Montoya and Ms. Navarro. And thank you to the interpreter that was present to help us with this bill. And so now I will formally close the hearing on 179, and broadcast will open up the lines for those who want to make public comment.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning. To speak in public comment, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Chair, your public line is open and working, and there are no callers at this time.
Thank you. Let's give it just about another minute or so in case someone's having technical difficulties, okay?
Thank you, Chair. Standing by.
Okay, seeing that there are no callers in the queue for public comment, committee members, any comments before we close this edition of Committee on Commerce and Labor? Seeing none, we will now adjourn, and we will be back on Monday. And it will probably be an abbreviated, an abbreviated meeting because Monday will be a deadline day. So we'll be back on Monday and continue to watch to see if there are any other changes, okay? Thank you so much. Have a great weekend. We are now adjourned.